Welcome to Corporate Queen's TV show. Today is Tuesday, and our special guest is Jo Ann Kirby from KRG Communications. She is part of our royal court, and she's going to talk about communicating blindfold. Jo Ann?
Thank you, Dawn. Communicating blindfold is a term I use when I want to describe what it's like to communicate solely over the telephone. When we communicate face-to-face, we've got a lot of stuff going on, Dawn. We have body language, we look at the way people are dressed. In fact, the majority of our interpersonal communication skills are nonverbal. They're not our spoken word. Now, when we get on the telephone with someone, all of a sudden we've taken all of that away. We no longer can look at how somebody's leaning into us to see if they're listening. We no longer can look at whether or not they're rolling their eyes at us, or how are they dressed, or do they seem to be attentive to us or non-attentive to us. All of that is gone. When we work on the telephone, it's as though someone's put a blindfold on us. And that's where the term communicating blindfold comes from. There are a number of differences between face-to-face communication and telephone communication because of that. And it's interesting, too, that among the things we start to look at these days, because people are emailing and texting, and quite frankly, people under 30 don't even do email anymore. Everything is texting. We're really losing our ability to speak with people appropriately. We're really losing some of our interpersonal skills. So when we talk to people on the telephone, it becomes all the more important to use really good skill sets on the phone with them. The first thing that we look at is we have to become an even better listener. Because just as when we see someone in person, we might judge them on what they're wearing, when we're on the phone with someone, we're going to judge them how they sound. What is their voice and how are they responding to us?
Now, what would you say is the perfect rate of speech?
Perfect rate of speech actually depends. The standard answer for that is approximately 180 words a minute. And that used to be referred to as the Midwestern broadcaster's accent. If you talk to someone, no matter where they are, and you speak at 180 words a minute, you really can't go wrong. Everyone will understand you. But there's kind of a couple of things you have to keep in mind. If I'm talking on the phone with someone who has a very fast voice, I want to speed up a little bit, and that's a technique called mirroring. People will feel more comfortable with you on the phone if they think you are like them in some way.
Okay.
And the best way on the phone is to mirror their rate of speech. So if they're speaking more quickly, we're going to speed up. If they're speaking more slowly, we're going to slow down. Now, does that mean if somebody's talking a mile a minute with me, I'm not going to talk that fast? I'm going to slow it down, but I may still talk faster than that 180 word rate. I might be talking closer to 190 or 200. On the other hand, if I'm talking with someone who's really slow when they speak because they're gathering their thoughts together, what I'm going to do is I may slow my speech down just a little bit as well. Again, it makes people feel a little bit more comfortable, and it's a great technique to get to kind of build an instant rapport without seeing someone face to face.
Now, what tips do you have for the viewers in this world of multitasking? Because, like you said, you're communicating blindfold, and I know a lot of times when I'm on the phone, I'm doing email or something else at the same exact moment.
Well, it depends upon how important that telephone call is to you. If it's an important telephone call, my advice on multitasking is don't. Because we really can't do two things at the same time, and there have been a number of studies in the last few years that bear this out. That the reason we can't remember anything is because we never really paid attention to it in the first place. So if something is important enough for us to be on the phone with someone, whether it is a customer or a prospective customer or a vendor, anyone that we need to do business with, we really want to give them our full attention. And the best way to do that is to focus directly on the telephone call itself. If you're chatting with your friends or your significant other, sure, multitask. But for business, when it comes to, making sure that you're running your business as effectively and efficiently as possible, in the case of telephone calls, you really do want to do one thing at a time.
What other tips do you have for us in communicating blindfold?
Well, among the things we need to keep in mind when we communicate blindfolded is that we have to become even better listeners. We are going to be listening for the words that a person is using, as well as their voice and their vocal tone. When I'm on the phone with people, since I have to take away all of my visuals, I'm really only left with the words and the voice of the person I'm talking to. So I want to listen objectively. I want to listen actively. I want to be in the moment. And that's why when you asked about multitasking before, I like to bring out that it's very hard to actively listen to someone if you're doing a few things at the same time.
I would agree.
If you, one of the things I like to listen for is not just what the person says, but what they don't say. Does the spoken word that they're using, does it match the tone of voice that they're using? The people who can say, go to hell and make it sound like this is a wonderful place to take a trip. And they're out there, so you need to make sure that the words and the voice are matching what they're saying. You want to be in listening for pauses. When is a person pausing? And pausing is great. I love it when people pause, because that gives them a chance to gather their thoughts, which is what they're doing. It gives me a chance to gather my thought, particularly if I'm trying to actively listen to someone. I want to make sure that I'm listening to everything they have to say. In fact, what I'll do sometimes when I'm speaking with people on the phone is I use a technique called acknowledgement or paraphrasing. And what that is I will, when I have the opportunity, I will repeat back to them in my own words what it is I think they've said to me as a question. And what that does is that clarifies that we're all on the same page. Because again, I don't have a visual. I'm not looking at somebody's PowerPoint, or I can't look at the notes that they have in their book on their desk for me to see. I'm really taking it only at their words. And I know we've all had situations where we've talked to someone and we know we're both speaking the same language, but we have no idea what it is they just said to us. So by paraphrasing it, by acknowledging that you've listened to them, that's a great way to make sure that you're on the same page. And most people, when you do a paraphrase and you ask it as a question, and this is a great technique for getting more information out of someone, they will either tell you yes and continue to tell you more, or if it's no, they'll continue by clarifying it. So it's really a win-win situation for yourself.
Now, would it be a good form or technique to ask someone if, they have a minute now to speak with them, or to see if they're involved in a PowerPoint presentation or something that's actually multitasking?
That is an excellent question, Dawn, and really it depends upon the reason for your call. If you are calling someone with whom you have a customer relationship with, or you have an ongoing business relationship with, yes, I definitely recommend, is this a good time to ask them? Is this a good time to speak? However, if I'm making a prospecting call to someone, as in my role as a salesperson and even as an owner of a company, let's face it, sometimes we all have to continue making some of our own prospecting calls. I don't necessarily want to ask someone at that point, do you have a minute? And there are two schools of thought on this. There is the school of thought that says you should always ask. It's polite. You want to make sure that this person actually has time to listen to your message, and I agree with that. The other school of thought says, but if you ask them if they have the time to speak and they figure out that you're selling something, well, they're automatically going to tell you no because they want to get you off the phone. And I understand that too. What I like to do is when I introduce myself, I like to use the phrase, I know you're busy, I won't keep you long, which gives people an opportunity. If they really can't speak to me, they will speak up, but otherwise I'm just going to continue on with what the purpose of my conversation is.
Perfect. Do you have any last tips for us?
Well, as I said, you do want to make sure that you listen. You want to make sure that you are paying attention to the voice. You want to make sure that you're paying attention to the words that people use. And by the way, that's a two-way street. When you're communicating with other people, you need to understand that they are listening to you. So does your voice match your message? Are you pausing where you want to pause for effect? And by the way, sometimes when you've used a presentation over the telephone many times, I love to build pauses in there because it makes it sound natural. Because sometimes when we've said the same thing over and over and over again, it becomes very rote and people can hear that. Whereas if I make a point of saying, I want to pause here, it just makes it sound more natural. The other thing that you want to make sure that you do is no matter how often you've made a telephone call for a particular purpose, for example, if you've had to put in the morning making prospecting calls, make sure that your last call sounds as fresh as your first call did.
Great. Okay, our audience member, Susanna Cabrera from Delicious Bites, had a question for Jo Ann.
Jo Ann, how did you deal over the phone with rejection? Because the biggest thing is when you have an inside salesperson, they cannot read the body language of the person on the other side of the phone. And that is a very difficult task when you're trying to get through the phone a message and keep that positive attitude that engage your counterpart.
That's a great question, because it actually is something that a lot of people who get into inside sales or any type of telemarketing work, or even someone who just is a part of their job, as I said before, as business owners, we sometimes have to spend a lot of time on the phone ourselves. And a lot of people put off doing prospecting because of the fear of rejection. And the thing to keep in mind is that rejection is a natural, normal part of the sales process. Not everybody's going to say yes. And I think if we have that understanding from the very beginning, it makes it a little easier. The other thing we need to do, and this is very hard if you're a business owner, is you need to separate yourself from the rejection. That you personally are not being rejected. What's being rejected is your offer at that moment in time.
Correct.
That doesn't mean that they may not be interested in this product at a later time. That doesn't mean that they're completely rejecting you, but it's just at this moment in time, and you need to be able to step back enough so that you realize that I'm not being rejected as an individual. What's being rejected is my offer, and even that may change as time goes on.
That's a very valid point, because what I find is that the business owner will not know what is going in the inside sales side. And I feel that close contact, so that you can remove from their mindset, not approaching a pipeline and a customer that they have, prospect, because they have that fear. Mm-hmm. Usually as a business owner, you don't have that fear because you are absolutely aligned with your strategy, but the inside sales force, that is the people executing the sales for you, might have that, and you don't know. You don't necessarily are aware that that's happening.
Well, one of the great things that you can do, and this is one of the reasons I love inside sales, because it runs on numbers.
Yeah.
And what you do is you figure out how many calls it takes to get to a yes. And if you find that number, when you go and you train your inside sales staff, you can tell them up front, look, you're going to make 10 calls, you're going to get 2 yeses. Now, that may mean that you may make 20 calls and then get 4 yeses in a row, but it's going to average out for every 10 calls, 2 yeses. And that number may change from business to business depending upon what type of product or company or what your economic situation is. But if you can tell people up front, this is what to expect, it makes it a lot easier to deal with the rejection.
That's a very good point, Jo Ann. For instance, one of the things I'd recommend, Susanna, is to have rewards programs set up, or to track those small monumental achievements. So if you're able to say, you got 2 yeses today, that's great, and give some kind of incentive reward, it'll make them feel to have a positive attitude, and it'll keep their energy higher. So maybe looking into activities, sales training, or something of that nature that helps them to have a positive attitude and to keep their energy up higher will definitely help in the process of cold calling, and prospecting, because that's a very difficult task on a daily basis. And it's hard to deal with rejection. And if you can always say, these are the positives, at the end of the day, they'll focus on the positives, they'll remember that, and they'll come in the next day and say, okay, maybe I can get 3 today. And, if you give them a little bit of reward, it goes a long way.
And I totally agree. We do something that is actually, we give them Starbucks rewards. Mm-hmm. So, and also sending a communication out and creating what I call healthy competition, mm-hmm. so that you have a communication and saying, hurrah for this person and that person achieve, and then use that best practice to kind of feed the rest of the people, mm-hmm. of the team, so that you don't deal with, okay, well, I want to compete just because I want to be better than you. You don't
Yeah.
want that environment.
Yeah.
You actually want them to collaborate to make it stronger, as they feel more empowered, that they're getting farther and farther, and their pipelines are growing and their commissions as well.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
You focus on the positive, and you
Correct.
focus on, I didn't get 2 more no's, I got 1 more yes today. And that, in the end, is the important thing.
And the other thing you could add to that is maybe doing team goals. So if there's 5 sales reps and they each were able as a combined team to get 15 calls a day or a week or whatever the situation may be, and giving them a group, we'll pay for lunch today or something like that, that also builds the relationship and the team building inside the sales team. So they don't feel that, all right, this one got 3 and I got 1, but at least as a team they were able to get 4. So that might be a great idea to implement.
Yeah, absolutely. And I imagine, Joanne, you find this absolutely certain, is that corporations or entrepreneurs don't really recognize the power in inside sales. Mm-hmm. You cut your cost of sales significantly. Mm-hmm. You can have people on the field for those major accounts, but at the same time, the inside sales is the force that can actually penetrate the sales and the people, because the customer on the other side perhaps cannot give 1 hour. Mm-hmm. They can give 20 minutes, and they can do it over the phone. Mm-hmm. So which is a lot easier, and they're willing, if you know the account and you're calling them with intelligent information that actually allows them to know that, okay, you're not just picking up the phone and calling me, you know who you're talking to. Mm-hmm. and which are my needs, then you engage right away. That's what I found. You engage right away the person on the other side, because they feel you're bringing a value. And that's what is so key in inside sales.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
Exactly. If it doesn't actually need to be physically demonstrated, there's nothing that can't be sold over the telephone.
Absolutely.
Susanna, why don't you tell us a little bit about Delicious Bites quickly?
Delicious Bite is a food manufacturing company that specializes in frozen Latin American appetizers. Our website is www.delicious-bite.com, and you can find our products in all the giant supermarkets, Stop and Shop, Giant Lanovers, in the New Jersey area, in Extra, Twin Cities, Supermarket. That's it.